Hello everyone, welcome to the second part. So what this is going to focus on is the counter-argument, which involves protection of the work, and those who defend the we perform side argue that without this discipline, performers would turn every piece into a vehicle from their own technique, and this means eventually obscuring the original art entirely. I understand performance practice 100%. I understand historical technique 100%. I think it's good to study it, but I think if you take it too far, you got to be very careful with it. However, for a virtuoso composer performer, this creates a cognitive dissonance. If you are capable of composing at a high level, being told you cannot tweak a phrase feels like being a chef who is forbidden from adding salt to a recipe. This is all from Gemini. So here is a summary table, the shift in musical agency. So Baroque, the role of the performer as partner collaborator, and the view of the score is a flexible blueprint. Romantic is the heroic individual and a guide for emotional expression. And the modern Werktreuer is the executive assistant, and the score now becomes a sacred, unchangeable text. So for the composer-performer, this concept of the Werktreuer creates a form of artistic stifling when the performance becomes entirely about correctness rather than creation and going back and editing. It also loses the living quality that defined music for centuries. Oh boy. The cult of the score. The you compose, we perform mentality is often referred to as Werktreuer. Fidelity to the work, it emerged primarily in the 19th century. Before this, the line between composer and performer was blurred. So here's one of the places it came from, which is institutional dogma. If a system punishes any derivation from the printed page, it ignores the fact that notation is an imperfect map of a musical idea, not the page itself. One thing that comes to mind for me immediately is, for example, there's some cases where ornamentation should be limited, and some cases where it's used very sparingly. For example, Gregorian chant. Sometimes drones are used, and organum, which is a parallel fifth or below the chant, is used occasionally, but it's just slight. Then also the concept of the triplum, which is the octave lower, is sometimes used as well on the chant. The next thing I want to mention is the loss of ornaments in the Baroque and Classical era. A performer who didn't add their own trills, cadenzas, or tweaks was considered unskilled. Forcing a modern virtuoso to play only what works on the page can be seen as cultish adherence to a text that was never meant to be static. Again, I talked about BWV 549 and 536, the two Bach pieces, and in the Baron Reiter edition of the Neue Bach Ausgabe, you can see that these two different versions in two different volumes. And this one line it's a gold mine. So if the Grand Master himself didn't treat his scores as immutable laws, it is logically inconsistent for modern institutions to force a one-and-done version on performers. Next thing. The gym rep. Your gym rep analogy is insightfully deepful. Music is like a physical feat, so body mechanics So Liszt and Rachmaninoff wrote for their specific hand in how they could move at the instrument the "we perform" fallacy when a non-performing composer writes something unplayable and demands it be played exactly as written. They are ignoring the biological reality of the composer. Embodied knowledge. The performer knows the gravity of the instrument, forcing them to ignore their physical intuition in favor of a composer's abstract idea can lead to problems with the performance. The big question: is it a cult? The big question, or as what I will refer to it now as the Zarg in the concert hall. It becomes cult-like when it prioritizes the sanctity of the dead composer, agency of the living artist, control. It demands total submission to an external authority, the score. So, yeah, so fluid mentality. Okay. The "you compose, we perform." A sacred, unfinished score, a vessel or translator for the performer, mistakes, a failure to respect the author, focus, preservation of the past. Okay, for the virtuoso, that would have been in earlier history, a blueprint or a living document, a co-creator or athlete, an opportunity for a tweak or variation, vitality of the present moment. Buckle up. This is the comparison between the Grey 17 cult and the "you compose, we perform" mentality. So the logic of the missing level. The floor plan was deleted from the blueprints in the TV episode, yet people live there in a state of arrested development. Parallel Musicology's Imaginary Museum, as musicologist Lydia Gurr describes it, creates a similar architectural erasure. Lydia Gurr wrote this concept 1992, 1994. This episode came out in 1996. Wow. Incredible timing. Incredible timing, Joe Straczynski. The work is the only thing on the map. The performer's physical reality. They are actually breathing, sweating, and toiling over the performance of this score is the Grey 17 of the concert hall. It is a level of existence that is necessary for the station to function, but is officially missing from the aesthetic blueprints. Purity through hiding is the next one. Jeremiah's cult found they have a higher truth by withdrawing from the rest of the station and living in stasis. They view the outside as noise or impurity. The parallel. Verk Troia functions as a form of aesthetic isolation, as a purity of thought. The performer is encouraged to withdraw from their own noisy personal journey or modern context to find the pure intent of the dead composer. I'm okay if you don't get too sentimental about the performance of the piece. I'm okay with that. However, it can be taken too far in terms of deifying the score. Deifying a performance score, that is.